Thank you for inviting me to this important forum. And it's quite early here in the US now, 5:30 in the morning. So you forgive me if my voice is not yet fully awakened to the presentation. And thank you for inviting me to Rishi Hood University, of course, to speak on this important subject. So I will address it in a very brief but concise manner. There is an anonymous proverb: education is that which remains when everything else is forgotten. So what is that which remains when everything else is forgotten? When all the information we received is forgotten, so something remains. And that is the change of consciousness and the capacity of consciousness to function through our faculties of consciousness. And that has to be educated first of all, especially in this time of AI. This is a new time for us, new age, when AI takes over and takes over our mechanical mental labor. And we don't need to really organize our material in concise manner because it will be done by AI much better than we can do. So in this time, it's very important for us to find a new framework for education, new approach to education. So for years in the University of Human Unity in Auroville, we were working on something which is called integral paradigm of knowledge, if there is such thing. Is there something which will kind of embody all capacities or all faculties of consciousness in a holistic manner, in an integral manner, which will form a new consciousness of man? So this is the question. I have a PowerPoint presentation, but most probably it's not important because my time is limited. So I will be kind of following my notes. Sri Aurobindo says, interestingly, those systems of education which start from insufficient knowledge of man think they have provided a satisfactory foundation when they have supplied the student with a large and well-selected mass of information on the various subjects, which comprise the best part of human culture at the time. The school gives the materials. It is for the students to use them. This is the formula. But the error here is fundamental. Error is fundamental. Information cannot be the foundation of intelligence. It can only be a part of the material out of which the knower builds knowledge. The starting point, the nucleus of fresh discovery and enlarged creation. An education that confines itself to imparting knowledge is no education. Just look at this definition. So what did we do all these years, all these decades? We were imparting knowledge. And it is, truly speaking, not education. Education is something else. So we are looking for a new form of education. That's why I started with Upanishads. My major is in the Vedas and Upanishads. And in the Upanishads, I found a format which may well fit to the new approach to education and humanities. So let me tell you about this. I cannot project. Can I project? Do you have this capacity to project to the screen?
Yes, sir. I think you should be able to.
Okay. Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Because it's easier to see and to, So, Sri Aurobindo speaks in the Upanishads, in his studies of the Upanishads, on three major fundamental epistemologies, let us call them this way. In the ancient conception of the universe, our material existence is formed from the five elemental states of matter: the ethereal, aerial, fiery, liquid, and solid. We know this, Pancha Mahabhutani. Everything that has to do with our material existence is called the elemental adhibhuta. In this material, there move non-material powers, manifesting through the mind force and life force, and work upon matter, non-material powers. And these are called gods or devas. Everything that has to do with the working of the non-material in us is called adhidaiva, that which pertains to the gods. But above the non-material powers, above these faculties of consciousness, containing them, greater than they, is the self or spirit, Atman. And everything that has to do with the highest existence in us is called the spiritual, Adhyatma. So we have three levels of our application of our consciousness. We can apply it to the surface, to the material world, perceive the material world. We can apply our consciousness to the development of our faculties, or these non-material powers, mind forces and life forces in us. And we can also turn them within for the self-discovery. So if I put this in the scheme, it's very simple. Adhyatma is in the middle, the innermost consciousness. Adhidaiva is in the middle. And finally, Adhibhuta is on the periphery. So if you look at these more carefully, we can see that our faculties of consciousness, which are Adhidaiva, it is our, seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking, all the faculties by which consciousness operates, can be turned outside, as we usually live, we look outside, or can be turned within. So when we turn outside, we forget about within. When we turn within, closing our eyes, ears, and seek for the inner presence, we forget about outside. So there is a dilemma, a psychological dilemma of a human psychology. We can either be looking outside or inside. And that was the reason why we have this spiritual approach, Advaitic approach, is looking within and not looking without. And the whole, Indian tradition of the last three, millennia is built on this idea that we have to find the inner presence. But Vedanta, or the ancient Upanishads, I take ancient only, they proposes something unique. It doesn't propose to look only within or only without. It proposes for these faculties to stay on the surface and to become, so to say, consciously passive, as Sri Aurobindo says, consciously passive, and receptive of the inner reality. So to say, to become the intermediaries between the Adhyatma and Adhibhuta, to permit the inner light of knowledge to reach to the surface. They become the mediators through which light will travel to the surface. So, how could we do this? What should we do to allow this to happen? And only then we can understand the surface phenomena, when the inner light reaches to the surface. If it doesn't reach to the surface, we have to turn within and forget about the surface, or we have to turn to the surface and forget about the within. So this dilemma has to be solved. So In the Upanishads, we know that these faculties are defined in Taittiriya, for example, as Annam, Pranam, Chakshushrotram, Manovacham, the 6 major faculties about which we hear throughout the Upanishads. Every Upanishad, nearly every Upanishad, speaks about these major faculties, as you know. Whatever page of the Upanishads you turn, you will find something about these faculties. And it is interesting that Upanishads are not speaking on consciousness as some kind of concept. They speak about consciousness in the terms of these faculties. So, if we could depict them or deconstruct these faculties, why these 6, we will see a very interesting picture of functionality of our consciousness. Manas is mind, but not mind as we understand it. It's the capacity, it's the faculty capable to concentrate consciousness at will, free will from the mind, on any object of sense. So basically, mind can choose where to direct consciousness and attention. As Yajnavalkya would say, it is not by the eye that we see, but by the mind that we see, by manas. It is not by the hearing that we hear, but by the manas we hear. Why? Because manas is directing the attention of consciousness, and then all the faculties can be applied. So, manas first, chakshuh, sight, as a faculty of apprehensive cognition, recognizing the form, rupam. Vak, the word, a faculty of self-expression and communication. It's not just the word, it's not language only. It is the, what we call the power of self-expression. Yeah? And we know the 4 levels of speech, paravak, pashyantivak. So pashyantivak is that intention, the light, the lightning which comes and wants to express something from the depth of the self. And that is the vak consciousness, or vak faculty of consciousness. Shrotram, hearing, is a faculty of comprehensive cognition. Comprehensive in the sense that we always recognize through hearing, through shruti, what the form, rupa or self, wants, or how it acts upon other selves. So it is always, the meaning is connected to this interactive cognition, which is, it is through hearing that we understand what the self wants. A very simple example, if I put somebody's face behind the glass and you don't hear what the face is telling us, we will see the face, we will have direct contact with the self, but we don't hear what the self wants. And this want is always something which is not there in the form. It is something beyond the form, which wants it to be. It's something which belongs to the invisible part of the presentation of the self. So it's a comprehension, understanding the self. And prana, breathing, living, feeling, as faculty of experiencing delight of existence. Annam, finally, or apana, breathing out, is the embodied prana, the matter, the touch, the final, as the objective cognition of the self. So, Sri Aurobindo speaks about 3 major faculties or accesses to reality through seeing, hearing, and touch. And it's quite interesting that we have the same in the educational psychology. There are people who are more visual, more audio, and more tactile. Yeah, so drishti, shruti, and viveka, the direct vision of the truth, the direct hearing of its word, and the direct discrimination of the right. Interestingly, there are also 3 major constant dvandvas in the Upanishads from these Annam pranam chakshuk shrotram manovacham. So manas and vak is one dvandva, or pair. Chakshuk and shrotram is another, seeing and hearing, and prana and apana, or prana and annam. If I put them in this construction, we will see these oppositions, manas and vak, chakshuk and shrotram, prana and apana. Interestingly, in the Upanishads, these four, as you see on one side, manas and chakshuk, thought and seeing, belonging to the cognition of rupa, the form. On the other side, shrotram and vak belongs to the recognition of nama. So nama and rupa, and by these nama and rupa, Brahman, according to Shatapatha Brahmana, embodied itself in this world as prana. So prana and annam is the balancing these four. And these four on the side, as you notice, there is on one side, if we take vak and shrotram, we will see that vak is active, self-expression, and shrotram is perceptive, faculty of the same, of nama. And the same side, chakshuk is perceptive, and manas is active, formulation of rupa as the imagination. So interestingly, these four in the Upanishads are considered to be Brahma Chatushpat, Brahma on four pillars or legs, which is kind of held in this manifestation as prana and embodied as annam. So why I'm saying all this so long, because it's important for the functionality of our consciousness and understanding what is next. Basically, interestingly, these are also the major universal faculties in the Veda. We have Agni, we have Surya and Vayu, and you notice here this Agni, Vayu and Surya, three levels. So there is apprehensive cognition on the manas and chakshuk, comprehensive on the vak and shrotram, and these two are connected by prana. Vak belongs to earth, chakshuk, or so to say, Agni belongs to as essential of earth, Surya as essential of heaven, and Vayu is the essence of antariksha. And if these three, Agni, Vayu, and Surya, are united, then the sacrifice is fulfilled. So to fulfill the sacrifice, we have to unite the apprehensive, comprehensive cognition in one experience of life. I'm kind of modifying my speech to be brief. So if we look at this closer, we will see very interesting formulations. So we have mind and seeing as recognizing of the form of the self, self-knowledge, apprehensive cognition, as Sri Aurobindo will define it. So we have active or subjective self-knowledge. We have perceptive, which is seeing more, recognizing the form, cognizing the form, and forming the form. We have also spirit knowledge, which is more word or relation knowledge, comprehensive. Self-expression, as the word expresses the inner self, which is invisible but wants to be. And perceptive, more hearing, combining all meanings into one meaningful space. So these samjnana, jnana, vijnana, prajnana are mentioned in the Aitareya, and Sri Aurobindo deals with them. I am not going into it because of lack of time. And then there is manifestation knowledge, which is dealing more with the representation of these in the feeling. That is the result of union of apprehensive and comprehensive cognition will generate life entity or some sense of being, and touch is the final form of the body. So if we project these into the humanities, we will find that they are most functional in the humanities. So if I take subjective self-knowledge, it will deal with this capacity of consciousness to be focused on any object of sense and know it by identity. Through myself, I know the object. And this is the psychological approach. So subjective self-knowledge, as you see, subjective, objective, self-knowledge. Self-knowledge, subjective, is psychological approach. That's how we know ourselves. Objective self-knowledge is philosophical approach, how we project this psychological self-knowledge into the world and see and identify that process of our knowledge of oneself with the world. I think everybody can agree who studies psychology or philosophy. Relation knowledge is quite interesting because it is relating of the self to the world. So linguistic approach, or philological, I can say, is subjective relation knowledge, where I relate myself to the world subjectively, express myself of what I want. And objective would be sociological and historical approach, relational. How on the scale of time things meaningfully relate, or in the space, sociological in the space and historical on the scale of time, meaningful relations of the selves. And finally, manifestation knowledge is artistic approach, art. That means creation, creation of the entities which have their own life and can influence other beings. This is already, we are coming to the world, to the manifestation. Art is the manifestation. Culture is the manifestation of the spirit, refined manifestation of the spirit. And scientific is the objective manifestation knowledge, where we learn about the world as such, looking at it objectively, scientifically. So this is something which gives us very interesting idea of approaches to knowledge. So psychological is built on the capacity of this major faculty of consciousness to identify itself with any object of sense. Objective self-knowledge is resulting in philosophical approach to knowledge, where we look at the world philosophically, view our psychological achievements and realizations in the application to the vaster world. Then we learn about expressing our deeper self and communicating it to the world, and then we see how the world meaningfully correlates all the selves, sociological, historical approach. And finally, we are able to manifest forms in terms of cultural events and artistic creation, and see it as the embodied objective world. So these 6 major approaches manifest these what we call humanities, or the domains of humanity. Psychology addresses subjective processes of thinking and self-evaluation. Philosophy explores the mental capacity for overview of mental concepts. Overview, philosophy, viewing always. Linguistic studies the faculty of speech as a means of communication, self-expression. Sociology and history examine relationships between individual and collective, both synchronically sociology and diachronically history. Art refines our feelings and senses in relation to the manifested world, and science of nature explores matter objectively. Now, I'm rushing to give my final, because time is ending. So I distinguished between the domains of knowledge, as psychology, philosophy, and so on, and approaches to knowledge. So domains are third-person inquiry approach method, and approaches to knowledge are the first person. So psychological approach differs from psychology, or philosophical approach from philosophy as domain. So instead of teaching domains, we should teach approaches. How to be psychologist, how to be philosopher, how to view the world psychologically, philosophically. So if you cross these domains and approaches, you will have a very interesting picture. So you can have psychological approach to the domain of psychology. You can study psychology as the subject psychologically. You can study philosophy psychologically. You can study linguistics psychologically, and you will have these new subjects which are available for studies. Psychology of philosophy and so on. Psychology of art, psychology of history. You can have also philosophical approach to psychology, to philosophy, to language, philosophy of history, Hegel's philosophy of history of philosophy, other way around, when you approach historically, and so on. Philosophy of art, philosophy of science, a big subject nowadays. Then you have linguistic approach. Historical approach, history of psychology, history of philosophy, history of language, linguistics, history proper, history of art, history of science. So basically what we need for the human beings to be totally integrally educated, we need this full set of the faculties. And the most important message which I want to give today is this, that these approaches to knowledge are connected to our major faculties of consciousness standing behind them. So instead of studying psychology or philosophy, we study ourselves. We use these approaches to knowledge as the means of learning about our own functionality and making ourselves totally and integrally developed. And I finish with the mother's quotation. It's only one small thing. An integral education which could, with some variations, be adapted to all the nations of the world, says the mother, must bring back the legitimate authority of the spirit over a matter fully developed and utilized. So this is the framework of the universal education applicable to all human beings. We all operate by seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking, feeling, and being in the body. We all have to view the world in some way. Psychologically, we have to know ourselves. Philosophically, view the world, some picture of the world. We have to have some metaphysical picture, how all things relate. We all have to have the capacity to express ourselves linguistically. We have to understand the history and the development, where we are coming from and where we are heading at. And we have to be able to manifest it in cultural events, in the artistic form of creation, and understand the world objectively. That is my presentation. Thank you. I guess there will be no question and answer session, so usually there will be much more interesting parts to discuss rather than to present this complex vision. But it is all built on the Upanishads. The ancient knowledge of Upanishads is coming back to us in a new form, helping us to find a way to the future and not to look at it only as the past, philosophy or something.